Tonight on EWTN Live, we're going to talk about faith in the workplace and how it can make our occupation much more satisfying, our contribution to the employer and employees more fruitful, and our witness to the gospel more Christ-like. So please stay with us. Thank you, welcome. I'm Father Mitch Pacwa. Welcome to EWTN Live, which is our chance to bring you guests from all over the world. Our guest tonight has spent about 20 years in secular, financial, and executive management roles. And as a husband and a father of 8 children, he's had to find ways to balance faith and family life while trying to maintain a vibrant witness of his faith in the secular corporate setting. He is also an author. He wrote Faith at Work, Finding Purpose Beyond the Paycheck. Please welcome our guest, Kevin Lowry. Kevin, how you doing?
Good, thanks. Great to be here.
Good to have you here. Well, that's an awful lot to do. I mean, having 8 children is a lot of work right there. And I'm sure you and your wife have your hands full, but also you have to have a job to feed those children. So how is it that you see faith comes into the workplace?
Yeah, I think it's very important really to think of this in a much different way than a lot of people do, because a lot of people have a sense that you need to check your faith at the door when you come in. I think nothing could be further from the truth. Really, when you bring your faith into the workplace, there's an incredible opportunity to not only become a better Christian or Catholic, but to become a more effective worker. So in so many ways, I think that we need to demonstrate that to people. But I think that there's also a legitimate fear on the part of others that we run into and we deal with every day, that what we mean when we say we're going to bring our faith to work is that we're going to proselytize and we're going to try to beat you over the head with a Bible or a catechism or something like that.
In other words, you'll have videotapes or audio tapes of Archbishop Sheen playing in the office, and no work gets done, but that's all right because we're listening to our...
Exactly.
Is that what you mean?
That's exactly right. So we're going to sit around all day, we're going to have these long theological conversations, and we're not going to get anything done.
Right.
That's not it at all.
Right.
And I think most of us, if we've been in the secular workplace, which I really consider to be the front lines of the new evangelization, you know, we've had people who have come to us and said, with either an ideology, a religion, whatever it may be, and try to basically shove it down our throats. And it doesn't work. We don't like it when it's done to us.
Right.
And of course, this has happened to me. I feel their pain.
Sure.
And so we can't approach it that way, because really, especially if we enter the workplace and we say, I've got the truth, you know, it's all about us. It's all about our pride really leading. Whereas if we go in with a different attitude where we say the truth has us, then we walk in with a spirit of humility, which is really one of the most attractive things that we can possibly come into contact with. So I think that we just need to think about it differently, and through that, you know, that different attitude, I think good things can happen. And that's really why I wrote the book, because I wanted to encourage people that it doesn't need to be difficult. First of all, it can be something, it can be small things, it can be just little things. You know, sanctifying our daily work doesn't have to be all about grandiose sort of things. It can just be the small stuff. But it's also something that through the intercession of the Holy Spirit, even our smallest efforts can really bring fruit in ways that are completely unforeseen.
So there are ways to subtly bring the faith in, but then there's also one other area that applies to both employers and employees, namely, how much do we allow our faith and the moral ramifications of our faith to affect our ethical decisions in business?
Sure. Well, and I think really if we have a solid faith, that it leads to a way of thinking that's a very useful way to approach business problems, and especially, thorny ethical issues. But there's so much to be said for coming at even just, cold, economic decision making with a sense and an appreciation for the dignity of the human person, which of course, we would speak of in more theological terms. But really, even secular businesses are catching on to this, and they're articulating it in a different way. But it's about serving people. It's about serving stakeholders. It's about caring about their employees. It's about setting up programs that help them to flourish. So I think that a faith perspective is invaluable in that. And then when you do hit the really rough patches where you've got these difficult ethical issues and things like that, then one of the best things that you can possibly do is rely on our faith, because our faith informs our decision making and our ways of thinking. And I'll give you a tangible example.
Please.
One time, and this was really kind of burned deep into my brain because it was such a painful event. But I had to fire a bunch of people in a department that I had built because of an acquisition. And I didn't have discretion over it. It was really kind of a done deal, but I was the guy who was assigned to do it. And I was just really upset about having to do this. I had hired a lot of these people, and it was just a tough set of circumstances. So one of the things that I did was I sought spiritual direction, because really, we need objectivity, and our faith tells us that that's something that's invaluable. And in addition, I sought out the advice of a friend of mine who is an HR professional.
HR?
Human resources,
okay.
I'm sorry, professional who had been through some layoff type situations. And it was one of those things where he gave me an article and he said, hey, I read this not too long ago. This really worked well for me. His name's Gary. And I got to tell you, Father, that article was the perfect thing at the exact right time. And I attributed that to the prayer and the Holy Spirit just sort of putting all of the things together in the best way at the right time, so that what could have been an even more difficult and almost an ugly situation really worked out about as well as it could have under the circumstances.
So that there are, at least 3 different ways that we approach this. For one thing, our faith gives us a broader perspective that puts money. I always like to tell people, money is a tool, not a goal.
Right.
That there are more important goals than money. Money helps you to acquire certain things and accomplish, but as a goal, it's really dumb. It's dirty, it's got a lot of germs on it. I mean, but it can also accomplish certain useful tasks.
Right.
But it's not worthy of a goal. Our faith gives us the wider perspective morally.
Yeah.
About things. Would
Absolutely.
that be a way to put it?
And that resonates, because really, and it's funny, my dad used to tell me that money is like air. You need a certain amount to live, but it's not the reason for living.
Right.
And I thought that was a really good way of putting it.
Sure.
Because if you think about it...
That's in your book, in fact.
Yeah,
I remember reading that.
It is. If you think about it from a Christian perspective, Jesus didn't come down to earth to accumulate wealth. Right. And of course we're called to imitate Christ, right? And if you have a serious issue with greed, really there's no filling that hole. You can acquire as much money as you want, but there's always more, because it's an infinite, want or desire. But on the flip side, if you look at it from a Christian standpoint, really, I would put forth that the highest form of value in business, and not just nonprofit organizations, but any organization, governmental, for-profit, anything, is service.
Yes.
Because really, if we serve effectively, and if we are doing everything that we possibly can for all whoever our stakeholders are, then we're doing something good. Now, that's not to say that profits are unimportant. Profits are very important. I mean, we have to make money. People need to give to EWTN to perpetuate the mission of the organization. So money's important, but it's not the most important thing.
It's again, the profit is a tool.
Right.
You need to pay everybody a good wage,
right.
an ethical living wage that is truly represents the fruit of their labor,
right.
and at the same time be able to compensate the people that are investors,
right.
because they deserve that. They took a risk, they deserve that, and seeing all of that as part of a wider service. This is a much wider ethical perspective.
Right.
And the Pope's recent encyclical also says we need to do what we can to include the poor as an aspect of the economy, not just as recipients of donations, but the dignity of their own work, as well as keeping in mind the environment, not just because the EPA will fine you, but because the environment is itself of value.
Right.
All of those wider perspectives
right.
can be kept in balance.
That's right. And see, really, if you think about some of the things that the Pope's talking about, especially the emphasis on the poor, is so beautiful, because we, of course, think about it. If we're on the other side, if we're on the giving side, we often think about, well, we're benefiting the poor. Right? They need this. They need our help. They need us to support various ministries, charities, different organizations that are helping them. But what that misses completely is the fact that we are helped as much as anybody, because really, charity, in a certain sense, helps us to offset and mitigate the temptation towards greed. Because what we're saying is, again, yeah, money's important, but it's not the most important thing. We're going to put God first. And isn't striving for holiness really all about that? We're trying to continue to perfect our charity throughout our lives.
But then still another aspect of the role of faith at work is that you also are a witness. You're an apostle
Yep.
for Christ, not by shoving it down. It's important to remember that the Word of God is called the two-edged sword of the Spirit, not a club that you beat over people's heads.
Right. Right.
And that you are there to give a witness
right.
to the truth that has you.
Right, exactly. And I think that as the church sort of soldiers on towards because it's sort of oriented to the true north, so to speak, and our culture kind of goes off and veers off into left field, there's going to be this increasing chasm between the two that, in a certain sense, is opportunity. But I've met a lot of converts. I'm a convert to the faith myself, and I'm incredibly grateful. I've never met one person who has been argued into the faith or shamed into the faith or manipulated into the faith. It doesn't happen that way. So really, if we think about it, when we go into the workplace, we just have to recognize that doesn't work. We're not going to go into work and have, our friend the atheist, and all of a sudden be able to have, an argument that carries on for 20 minutes, and at the end, all of a sudden they say, hey, my eyes have been opened, I'm going to start RCIA. It doesn't work like that. We're there to sow seeds, and, increasingly, becoming Catholic is almost like adopting a new worldview. It's a big change. I mean, even I was Presbyterian when I was a kid. It's a big shift from going from that into becoming fully immersed in the church. So I think that the better strategy is one where we really have to work on being attractive to other people. where our behavior, first and foremost, forget about our words, focus on the behaviors first, our actions. And thanks be to God, we can still talk about faith in the workplace. It's not illegal, right?
It almost was.
Well, right.
Back in the days of Clinton, remember that his EEOC was planning to make it illegal to have any religious symbolism or a Bible or anything at all in any workplace, private or public. And I couldn't believe it, so I called the EEOC office I was visiting California. I said, oh yeah, we're going to do that. We're planning to get that going. But Christians stood up and the cowards in the government backed down.
Right. Well, I think that it's very important that we have our religious liberties intact, certainly, so that we can continue to talk about it in the workplace, because we don't want that to be banned. But the thing that is most compelling is our actions, because you can't fake some of the things that we should be known for, because how is it that they know that we're Christians? But by our love. So we really need to exemplify that. And it's funny because some of those lessons that I've learned from people who aren't the most faithful people in the world. And sometimes they put us to shame. And again, I'll give you a great example. I worked for a guy many years ago who was just a good man. He was a good-hearted guy. And I'll never forget this, because this just cut me to the heart. But my wife and we had, I think, 4 kids at the time. We were relocating because my parents had moved down to Steubenville. My dad was teaching at Franciscan. And we thought, okay, we have 4 kids, and they're all, 5 years old and under at that point, and we need free babysitting. So we're going to relocate to Pittsburgh, where near the family.
Grandma's go close by.
Exactly. So so I gave a 2-week notice to the CPA firm that I was working with at the time. And I thought, I'm acting in good faith. I'm trying to be very gracious on the way out, everything else. And I'll never forget, the partner of the firm said, okay, I appreciate that, but today's your last day. And I was basically walked to the door, because in the cold light of economic reality, to him it was no big deal. It was just, we can do without you. We'll save your 2 weeks salary. To me, it was devastating. I remember calling my wife, and she cried. I felt terrible because it was on me. I was naive, and now all of a sudden, we, again, 4 kids, we're in the middle of a relocation. We didn't have 2 nickels to rub together at that point, and I felt terrible. But I went to visit a good friend who I used to work for, and in probably no more than an hour, he had hired me to do some consulting for him and written me a check and handed it to me. And I got to tell you, the impact of that on me was dramatic, because just that act of generosity, and it made sense to him. I gave him good value for his consulting money and everything else, but just the fact that he was so good-hearted, that he recognized the fact that I was in need, that I felt really terrible about what had happened. I felt like an idiot, and he answered that need. So turn that around and think about, how can we do that for others?
Exactly.
How can we look at the people that we work with on a daily basis, and I guarantee that there are people going through hardships. Every place, it doesn't matter what sort of workplace we have. Everybody has difficulties that are sometimes very deeply held, and they don't sometimes reach the surface. But this is why we have to have that sense of compassion, because really, when we go to the workplace, one of the greatest things that we have is the fact that we have experienced God's mercy as Christians. You wrote a great book on this topic, right? All about mercy. It's the most incredible thing. I mean, if you and I started up a business, okay, and we were having this, it was a Christian business, and we were selling Christianity, and we've got a suite of products, right? The greatest, most awesome product that we have is mercy. It's the most incredible thing. So we need to share that. We need to share that with others.
Yeah, and I think that it's again part of that wider view of life that our faith brings to how we deal with business.
Sure.
So that no, it's just the bottom line here. That's all. No, it's not. That gentleman that helped you out said, no, this is a family. They need some help. Let's work that in. This is the kind of thing that we all try to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I think one of, going back to the attraction and that we're really working to attract people, the other thing that our faith teaches us, and it took me a long time to kind of figure this out, Father. I'm not the quickest guy in the world. But one of the most attractive aspects of people is their humility. And this is something where, again, we've got the perfect model. We've got Jesus who became a baby, and came to earth and was in the most humble circumstances. And I think that's the other, just another very key attribute that we can bring to the workplace that really helps people.
And I think just to help folks a little bit with that, because too often people think of humility as, well, I'm really nobody, I'm nothing, I can't. Right. And putting yourself down is not humility, in fact, because as Sister Ida had said to me back in 8th grade, you're still focused on yourself.
Right, right.
That's not what humility is about. Humility is more focusing on the greatness of God, and realizing in the face of His infinity, His greatness, His all-powerful reality, that He's the source of truth, He's all goodness. We're just so small. And that realization is humility rather than, oh, I'm really bad. No, it's about focusing on God.
Right. And even if we were to say, oh, I'm trying to be humble by saying I'm terrible, I'm no good, even that, it would deny God's gifts to us that He gives every single one of us. Yeah. So it's interesting. One of the very practical things that I've seen regarding humility in the workplace is that humility is a key building block in a very practical sense to teamwork. And of course, who is it these days that doesn't work with other people? Right? Everybody at some level, we all have to work with other people. The beauty of humility, though, is being able to recognize gifts in other people, and then to be able to have a complementary relationship with them. I have a controller that I work with at my company, and she and I are absolute polar opposites on everything. I'm kind of the big picture guy. She's very detail oriented, and I like strategy. She likes execution. It's the most amazing thing. We're just complete opposites. And the relationship works beautifully because of the fact that we have gifts in different areas.
See, and that's where the two of the capital sins can mess things up. If I envy what somebody else has, or if I'm jealous, I've got mine, nobody else can have it. These are vices that really mess up a relationship in business. Absolutely. While virtue, says, no, you complement what I do, and I'm delighted that you're better at what you do.
Right. Right.
And that I get to do what I know how to do.
Exactly. And when it comes to vices, for example, one of the things, the opposite of humility, pride, is one of the things that characterizes what we would call political workplaces. Because, when you've got people who have a humility...
As opposed to politics that don't do any work?
Well, yeah.
That's another problem.
That's
Sorry.
right. But if you have a good, well-functioning team, there's humility and they work together well. And it makes the teams work effectively together. But in the opposite, in the political environment, back in the humility sense, people are playing off one another's strengths.
Right.
That's what they're doing. But in a political sense, they're playing off one another's weaknesses.
Right.
And we've all seen or sometimes been involved in those types of environments. it's a terrible place to be.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotations is by a Spanish philosopher, Unamuno, who had gone over to teach for a year, they had a teaching position for a year at Harvard University. But when he returned to Spain, they asked him, well, what was it like at Harvard? And he said, the infighting is so bitter and so intense because the stakes are so low.
Really?
And that's oftentimes the case when it's highly politicized and people are going, it's because the stakes are very low. And they think, I got to get my little piece of the pie, and you can't have it. And I'll do whatever I have to do to get it. That's the mentality.
Yeah.
And that's not the mentality of folks who say, no, how do we get more dough and make a bigger pie?
Right.
That's the cooperative, humble approach.
Right, right. Yeah, it's funny when you say that. I think my dad actually went to MIT, so he didn't go to Harvard, so maybe he didn't get any of that. But I struggled for a while with that, about just saying, hey, my dad had this great achievement. He got his doctorate at MIT in business, even after having been a Presbyterian minister, which is kind of another story. But it's funny because I looked at that and I thought, well, I went to this really small Catholic college called Franciscan University in Steubenville, Ohio, that most of my friends had never heard of. And, can I ever aspire to go higher? And now, with the benefit of hindsight, 20 plus years out, I look back at that and I say, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because not only did I go there and get some great accounting education, but I also was able to study theology and philosophy and a bunch of different areas that really were useful in bringing to the workplace, that helped me think better about situations and just come up with better approaches.
Yeah, see, that's a very important. I certainly considered that when I chose grad school. Is it a place? The place I did go to was one of cooperative attitudes, whereas some of the universities I looked at, the students wouldn't tell anybody about any of the work they were doing because somebody might steal my ideas. Right. Whereas where I went to school, we met, when we were doing dissertations, we met, discussed, oh, I read an article that might help you, and it makes all the difference in the world in every aspect of life. And it's one that seeks the good of the other person.
Right.
And that's a benefit.
Absolutely. And it all goes back to service.
Yeah.
Being able to get out of ourselves, which is tough. And again, when I wrote the book, one of the things that was just funny, I mean, I would sit there and I would chuckle as I'm writing this thing, because I tell a lot of stories about dumb things that I did along the way, but where valuable lessons came out of it. So I tell a lot of stories because, unlike my dad, I'm not an academic, so it's a very practical book. But again, the whole point is that I want to encourage people, take your faith to work. It's so important, and it doesn't have to be difficult. Right. And we can do it in ways that are completely unobtrusive and certainly not offensive to anybody.
Exactly. We're going to take a little break, but I want to let you know that Kevin has a website. It's called gratefulconvert.com. And his book is Faith at Work, Finding Purpose Beyond the Paycheck. You can get that at EWTN's Religious Catalog by going online, EWTNRC.com, or you can call them at 1-800-854-6316. So we'll be back in just about 2 minutes. We'll get questions from you and our studio audience, so please stay with us. Welcome back. And first of all, I want to invite you to do what these nice folks have done, which is to come down here and be part of our studio audience. If you have an opportunity to come down here and make a pilgrimage, please contact our pilgrimage department. Their phone number is 205-271-2966. Or you can also go to the website, EWTN.com, and they'll give you information about scheduling of masses, programs, tours of the studios, places to stay, good places to eat. We got a lot of that down here too. And we'd love having you here. Plus, of course, they'll let you know about how to get up to Huntsville to visit the sisters. You ready for some questions?
I am.
All right, let's get you up. Let's start off with Kathleen. Hello, Kathleen.
Okay.
Hi, where are you from?
Hello.
Hi, Kathleen.
Oh, thank you very much for taking my call, Father.
Sure, where are you from?
Jacksonville, Florida.
Oh, nice town. I like that place. And
Thank you.
what's your question?
Well, my challenge is responding to moral topics brought up by another coworker in an environment that discourages political or religious topics. We're not supposed to talk about those things. But so I would like to ask Mr. Lowry what he would suggest for us to do and say that will not only reflect our moral values but adhere to the company's policy.
All right. Now, did somebody bring up a moral issue to you?
Yes, in casual conversation, like talking about the dubious facts about homosexuality, for instance.
Okay. And so, but you and this other person could get in trouble if you pursued that conversation.
That's correct.
Okay. So now what does she do?
Okay. So obviously sometimes there are sensitive topics that come up in the workplace.
Sure.
And first and foremost, I think that we need to listen before we speak, because that's just a basic tenet of being respectful. And at the same time, usually we can articulate truth in ways that corresponds with natural law. We don't have to use religious language right out of the gate. So there are ways that we can get the point across without being overtly religious in the words that we use. But then there's more to it than that. I think that we can agree to go out to lunch or something, and we're not gonna discuss this. If the company has a policy against it, we're not gonna take 15 minutes right now and sit down and talk about this. We'll do it after work. We'll do it, some other place, some other time. I think that, but also recognizing that we need to allow for other people's free will, and again, we're there to plant the seeds and not necessarily convert them spontaneously, because conversion is a long process, and just trying to take somebody from where they are, it may take a long time.
It's sort of like there's some boys that I've known who will say, if there's trouble, if some kid gets started causing trouble in the classroom, say, we'll pick this up again in the playground after school. You might take that same mentality, but maybe with a little less vigor than some boys would do.
Right. But the other thing that we can do, though, is, think about it. We have this Catholic toolbox, essentially, of things that really do make a difference. We believe. We can offer masses for this individual. We can pray for them. We can pray rosaries for them. There are countless ways that we can truly desire what's best for them, but at the same time have the humility and the patience to be able to engage in a conversation over the foreseeable future without having to put an end on it, because it's really, again, our job to plant the seeds, the Holy Spirit's job to cause those seeds to bloom.
And another image I like to use as well, and this goes along with, being a Canadian, you have a very nice personality, very pleasant. That's your whole country, your home country is just like that. And I like to compare that to the princess's mattress. And what I'm doing is putting peas underneath it, and just being there to give just a little bit of agitation.
Right.
Like my mother said, I was an agitator. Ma'am, where are you from?
Eagle Pass, Texas.
Oh, great, good to have you here. Welcome, welcome. And what is your question?
Well, it's not necessarily a question, but I just want to agree with what you've been saying, because a lot of the times at work, you know, when you have either a leadership role or whatever, there is always situations that you encounter where the Holy Spirit makes you talk about God. And how it happens, I don't know, but I always feel that He gives us the opportunity to talk about Him, whether it's right or wrong at the workplace, because the law or whatever. But when you feel that, I think that we have to have the freedom to be able to talk about God at the workplace. And I'm listening to you, how we can help our partners, employees, friends. And I think that we talk a lot about the freedom of speech. I think that that really has to be in every workplace, because we talk about honesty. We talk about how God gave us the example of how we need to walk with Him. He gave us that life, and He showed us the steps. And if we have the opportunity to do that at work, why can we get this other person to join us in saying, I'm gonna walk right by side with Jesus?
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that that is important. Certainly we want to be able to talk about it in the right place and at the right time. The thing that we have to keep in mind, though, is that part of it depends on our relationship with the person that we're speaking with. And to the extent that we have built a stronger relationship with that person through our love, our graciousness, our respect, then we're going to have more credibility as we speak with them. And again, we have to honor their free will, because free will was God's idea, right? Not ours. But I think that if we take a relational approach to it, it's just more effective every time.
Okay. I have another caller. Hello, Matthew.
Hey.
Hey, what can we do for you today?
Yes. I work for the film industry. I'm 27 years old. I've been working for the film industry for about 5 years. And I work for a guy who is also a Christian as well. But sometimes I'm asked to edit, because I'm a video editor. I'm asked to edit some things that go against the Catholic Church's teaching. So how do I respectfully say no, especially when I work closely with my boss, and he's a Christian guy, and I respect him. But how do I say no to something that's going to be, delivered to thousands and thousands of people to watch, when I know in my heart I'm editing something that is not going to, that goes contrary to what the Catholic Church teaches?
All right, hang on there, Matthew. I want to get back to you. How do you handle that?
I think that there's a right way to approach it under the circumstances. Personally, I like to do a few things in preparation for difficult discussions. I like to go to confession. I like to receive the Eucharist. I like to sort of fall back on the sacramental life of the church. I do like to seek out.
Because what you're doing there is you're coming to Jesus, forgive my sins.
Exactly.
Jesus, I need you inside of me.
Exactly.
In the Holy Eucharist. And now let's go forward.
Right, because I know I am not the preeminent source of wisdom, but I know who is. So then I do like getting objectivity, and this is where a spiritual director can come into play, or a trusted colleague with a faith background, something like that. Sometimes we do need to have those tough discussions, and sometimes I know people who have come to the point where they've even said, I need to move on. But I think that it's good first to explore the options and to have that, even the difficult conversations, but to be in the right frame of mind first. And again, go in with a spirit of humility, not that we're trying to shove anything down other people's throats, but we do need to bring the issue to their attention.
Matthew, you still there?
Yes.
Okay, let me ask you this. Your employer is a Christian. One of the questions I would pose to him is, do you believe that Jesus Christ is the way, and the truth. Is Jesus the truth? And is the Holy Spirit known as the Spirit of truth? And I would ask him straight up, do you believe that? I'm sure if he's a Christian, he does. Then I think on that basis, what we have as a responsibility is to state the truth. We can state where the disagreements are, but in order to have authentic discussion, we cannot falsify, because falsehood is from the father of lies. Jesus identifies as Satan. Does that make sense as a way to approach some of this?
Yes, and I definitely agree about going to church, and I go to church every Sunday. And I wish I could go to daily mass. I'm in love with Christ. I'm in love with the Eucharist and everything that the Catholic Church has to teach. And that's one of the reasons why I think God was calling me to the film industry, is to promote His gospel. And sometimes I'm asked to do something that's contrary. And yes, I do agree that that's a good question to ask him. Because he's a Christian.
Yeah, and it's because he's a Christian, and he shares the value of loving what is true and opposing what is false. Now, again, he may disagree with us. Okay, we can deal with that. But present what we actually believe and be ready to show him in the catechism, etc. This is what the church actually says. You're not presenting that. Deal with the disagreement. I'll edit that. But tell the truth, because anything else comes from the father of lies. And as soon as we do that, we're working for him, and we don't want to do that. We're working for Jesus. Try that with that conversation. See how that goes for you, Matthew.
Okay, thank you very much, Father Mitch.
You're welcome. Ma'am, where are you from?
I'm from Canfield, Ohio.
Good to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question.
Your question or comment?
Well, it's really not a question. At home, there's a company where I have dear friends that work, and they are, it sounds like what you're doing. It's like faith-based. They're very successful, great group of people. But I don't know what their day-to-day operations are and how they actually do what they do in that respect. So I was just wondering, having some examples of how you actually handle situations that may come up that then get people to see that this really is the way to go, or brings them closer to God. So, just like maybe with a mother with a child that needs child care, maybe needing some extra time off, or just examples of how you make that work.
Okay, and certainly when it comes to moms who need help in the workplace, I'm kind of a sucker for that, because it's well known that I have 8 kids. So it's really hard for me to say no to requests like that. But what's really important is that we try to meet their needs, and those needs are all over the board. So in the case of a mom who has a child, maybe the child's sick or something like that, we have to be understanding. It's good because it's the right thing to do within the context of our faith, but it's good business too, because chances are we've got a valuable employee. I remember a few years ago, there was a woman I worked with who just was having a bad time, and she was going through relationship difficulties, she was having financial struggles, and then one morning she was really late to work, and it turned out she had a flat tire. So it was just sort of everything, and then she came in and she was crying and she was so upset. And so basically what happened was I ended up paying for her tire. And to me, it was, it didn't break the bank or anything like that, but it was just a way for me to support her and say, you know what, you matter, not only to the company, but to me as your boss. And, there's really something I think that resonates when we're able to do that, because from my standpoint, it was an opportunity. So I was very happy to do that. But even in terms of other ways to look at this, outside of just meeting people's needs, in terms of how do we do this? How do we bring the faith to work every day? You know, people ask about things like how do you balance work and family and stuff like that. And I really think that there's a lot to it in how you structure your day. And there are, you know, I make a point in the book about how if we're doing God's will, we know that He gave us enough time to do it because He didn't set us up for failure, right? Mm-hmm. So there may be things on our to-do list that don't belong there. And at the same time, we have to potentially insert a couple things just into our daily routine. And can we have just a little bit of mental prayer in the morning? Can we make a morning offering? Can we fit a rosary in, even if it's on during our daily commute or something like that?
And even, you know, if it's necessary, do half the rosary on the way into work, half the rosary on the way out.
That's right.
That's a better thing to do with your fingers than what some of the other drivers are doing.
That's right. See, it can keep us safe too. That's exactly right. But you know, I think one of the times that this really came home to me was that we have one of our sons who had some medical problems when he was born. And I'll never forget driving down the highway and thinking, you know, I'm not cutting it in terms of I'm not spending enough time at work and I'm not spending enough time at home. What, you know, how's this all going to play out? So promptly God answered my prayer by sending us this child within I think a 6-month period. And he was in the neonatal ICU for the first month of his life. I've never prioritized like I did then. And so my challenge now to people is when they come and they say, you know, I'm just having all these difficulties balancing work and family. I say, okay, how would things change if you had someone close to you in the ICU? Mm-hmm. Because all of a sudden, everything changes. Because you've got to put your effort into that which is most important. And we know what's most important is our relationship with God. Yep. So we have to build that into our daily routine.
Sure. Let's take another caller. Hello, James.
Hello.
Hi, where are you from?
Erie, Pennsylvania.
Good to have you. And what's your question?
Well, Jesus says, you know, we can't serve two masters. We cannot serve both God and mammon. And the New Testament also says we must obey God rather than men. So when there's moral conflicts between people and their employers, you know, how do we handle that? Following Jesus is very costly in worldly terms, but if you take any martyr, like Jesus dying on the cross, he's not getting paid money for that. You know, St. Thomas More, he's in prison, he's not getting paid money, and he had a wife and children, and then he got beheaded, but he's not getting money for that, but he's getting blessed deep down where it really counts. So, you know, could you comment on that, please? Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I think certainly there's no question that God is our ultimate end and destination, and that's what we're striving for more than anything. Money, as you were saying so well at the beginning of the program, is a means. It's just, it's part of what we have to try to handle and try to handle well. Now, there's nothing intrinsically evil about money itself. You know, now the disordered attempt to accumulate it, you know, it's the love of money that's the root of evil. But I think that we also have to be careful that when there's conflict in the workplace or moral conflict or people see things differently, first of all, I don't think that we should be self-censoring and just, you know, being completely quiet because we're not politically correct anymore. But at the same time, I don't think that the solution to every problem is confrontation. And actually St. Thomas More is a great example of that. St. Thomas More really tried to do a whole lot of things before he had to take his final stand and say, you know what, I'm not going there. I can't do it. We have to try to use our intellect and use our wits and use everything, all the gifts that we've been given to try to use the process not only for our own sanctification, but for that of others.
And you know, there might be times when an employer asks you to do something unethical.
Sure.
Sell a product that is very faulty and dangerous, use various forms of manipulation, and all, it can go on and on.
Yep.
And we have to we can't say, oh, well, I know it goes against the 10 Commandments to endanger people's lives or to sexually harass somebody at work and so on. But, you know, I got to get my job. We do have to make some decisions.
Absolutely. And sometimes there's no question we got to say no.
Yep.
But it's how we say no. You know, are we able to be empathetic? Are we able to put ourselves in the other person's shoes? Because that person, chances are, has a lot of pressures on them that maybe aren't readily visible from our standpoints. So I think that as much as, you know, we all talk about how there are these increasing conflicts coming into play, we need to get better at handling those. And absolutely, we have to stand strong sometimes, but it's how it's done that I think is critically important.
Mm-hmm. We have another caller. Hello, John?
Yes.
Hi, where are you calling from?
I'm in Minnesota.
Great. And what's your question?
Well, I'm very interested in the concepts of servant leadership and corporate social responsibility. So I wanted our guests to kind of talk a little bit about if people are looking to work at certain companies and do things, how can you judge if that company embodies servant leadership and is really corporate, socially responsible? What are the signs? What are the things to look for?
That's a great question.
Great question.
I got phenomenal advice on precisely this question when I was 18 years old during a little hiatus from Franciscan U, and I went to work for Sony up in Canada. And my dad told me, he said, pay attention to how the president of the company treats the janitor. And I'll tell you, I actually saw an interaction between the two where the president came up to the janitor, and this is within a couple months of going to work there, and addressed him by name. And just, you know, quick, not significant interaction, but just, you know, sort of patted him on the back, how are you doing, everything else. That makes a difference. It's really how does the leadership treat people? And how is it that they, you know, do they value their stakeholders? And that's going to tell you a lot about the culture. Now, the good news is there are great ways to research companies these days, but especially, and servant leadership, I love the concept, and of course I think a lot of us try to work on that on a daily basis, and I think it's implicit in what we've been talking about tonight. But there's beauty and there's power in that approach, because in getting out of ourselves and serving others, and it doesn't matter whether it's up or down the food chain at work, you know, we can serve regardless of who the other person is.
And show dignity to people that can't really promote your career,
right,
but just deserve dignity because they are the children of God.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Now, otherwise, you're just a schmooze. Hello, we have Kinde.
Yes.
Hi, where are you from?
Hi, Father. I'm from Maryland.
Great. And your question?
My question is, I work for a consulting firm, and we work pretty hard. And at times, we have to turn around things very quickly. And unfortunately, we're asked to work on Sunday. So how can I handle this? Because I'm happy to work Monday through Saturday, but Sunday is off the table.
Yeah.
That's a great question, and I feel for you because I worked in a CPA firm environment for many years early in my career, and it's incredibly demanding, you know, as consulting certainly is as well. I think, though, that really at some point there has to be a very critical conversation that goes on with the leadership of the firm, or, you know, whoever the bosses are, and articulate the concerns, and at the same time, again, try to be empathetic and understand their side of it and see if there's a way that an accommodation can be made.
Because I think even under federal law, that being able to worship on Friday if you're Muslim, Saturday for Jews, and Sunday for Christians, I think that's something that a boss has to accommodate people's conscience to be able to work under federal work laws, and the EEOC can do that. So that would be something to also pursue if necessary. But I understand because my boss makes me work on Sundays too. We have run out of time. Thank you very much. Again, your website is gratefulconvert.com, and Kevin's book is Faith at Work, Finding Purpose Beyond the Paycheck, at EWTNRC.com, or the phone number for the catalog is 1-800-854-6316. And may the Lord bless all of you and keep you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. And for all of us who are at this workplace, we depend on your generosity to keep us going. We can do this program and all the other work we do because you keep us in between your gas bill, your electric bill, and your cable bill. And we especially need you reminded to do that in the summertime because our bill collectors don't go on vacation. Thank you.